I also see Sandra's hand.
Yeah, I just have one question on the charging infrastructure. Is that going to be closed infrastructure, meaning like only for Fresno Unified School District use, or is that going to be like shared infrastructure where it's available for public use as well?
That's a great question. I'll look to my team. I don't know if Carrie or Ryan has a response to that.
I believe it would be limited to the school district. Sandra, I'm not sure if you're talking about would like other school districts that have electric buses could use, or are you talking about like personal vehicles?
Yeah, I'm thinking more of either other school districts and or like I know that there's been like ride share programs with like van pools or like larger kind of micro transit systems that have gone under because of the lack of charging infrastructure. So I'm just wondering like how are we thinking about like expanding infrastructure for shared transportation, whether that's through like inter district collaboration or interagency collaborations or sharing of the resource.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think we'll write that down and we'll have to discuss that. That's an interesting scenario that we haven't been asked about before.
Greg, I see your hand is up too.
Yeah, I was going to address Sandra's comment. Typically on bus charging, it's bus to bus, and you can't use it for cars because of the power voltage, and they have to be able to match. So if they had a XYZ model, they couldn't do an ABC vendor when it comes to the bus. So, but typically with school buses, you're looking at 3 manufacturers. So you may have a better chance there. The other difficulty is most of these large chargers are not rapids. So you're talking about a 6 to 8 hour need. And most of us are charging overnight, not during the day because of the cost.
Okay, that's helpful to hear, but I definitely think I would like to encourage the district to think about, because one of the challenges I think with adoption of like electric fleets, it has been that the kind of, what is that, charge, I forget what they call it, right, kind of concerns with being able to charge vehicles, right, to like implement them more like for wider adoption. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but I think just thinking about how do we expand charging infrastructure, both that's for public and private, right? In this regard, it would be private kind of use, and then thinking about, right, like if that would that then enable maybe like smaller school districts who don't have the same budget as Fresno Unified or other, right, other government agencies to encourage them to adopt, right, more electric bus infrastructure. I think just thinking about, you know, how do we maximize and then like help leverage additional investments.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sandra. And that was definitely one of the, so a few, I forget how many meetings ago it was, when we initially brought, had this discussion about school buses and how to make this program, be successful. We definitely heard about the charging challenges and making sure that charging was made available through this program in addition to the buses. And so, for example, Fresno Unified, in this case has 4.5 million in addition to $1 million for the charging. So if, we were also looking to do the same thing with other interested school districts within the boundary to kind of set up that same type of thing to support them, put in the additional infrastructure that they would need, charging infrastructure that they would need to make it a successful program. But we'll definitely look into what we discussed too.
Bill, go ahead.
I don't know that this is related, and I don't have a good recollection right now, but I did receive an email a week or two ago concerning electricity in the city of Fresno, and I don't know if this company or something that was mentioned, if it's more efficient, if it's cheaper, or if if the air board has any comments on it, if it's about it, or if anyone else has more information concerning that. I think a little while back, the city did have some interest in trying to find a different supplier than PG&E. And I don't know if this particular email was concerning that, but if anybody has an update on the power supply issues in the city or our area, it'd be appreciated to hear about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
I guess I'll take Bill's question. So that was a lot of huffing and puffing. So the city is not going to do anything beyond PG&E at this point, but we are fighting the 38% rate increase that is now proposed for year number 2 in a row. So that's pretty much that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill, and thanks, Greg, for responding. Those are a couple of updates. Happy to take any other questions throughout the rest of this meeting. But for now, I'll go ahead and move on to this, essentially our final slide of this presentation, in which those are some of the measures that we had some really great progress on in the last couple of months, kind of shifting us over a little bit. At the end of the last meeting,
excuse me. I had a question on one of the slides, and I had my hand up, and I've been patiently waiting.
Oh, go ahead, Lisa. I just didn't see your hand.
Could you go back a couple of slides? And I think Sandra's point of the buses and ride pools is really good to dovetail everything. Go back 2 more. And also to the PG&E thing, wasn't there like a survey sent out? Okay, go forward 1. I missed it.
did you mean, Lisa, do you mean the school bus and infrastructure slide?
Was it a school bus? No, it was air filtration. This is the one.
Oh.
One of the things I think that you guys really need to do, and the program is missing its mark. Not the school bus, the air filtration is what I'm talking about. Residential is, I've previously asked that you guys do some presentations in front of the city council. I think this would be a very good opportunity to request time at next week's city council. They'll give you like 10 or 15 minutes, easy, or 3 minutes. Because you're a sister agency, they'll probably give you like 5 or 10 minutes to do a presentation of the stuff that's coming down the pike. And it's a good promotional opportunity to get out to the council members who have 617 in their district, so they can dovetail their marketing with your marketing to get people to start to participate in things. And it's like free advertisement, and I still don't know why the air district isn't doing that. And I think you would get a better turnout, especially since things are going to be growing, and who knows what the fire season's going to look like. And with electricity going up, I think it's important to jump out ahead of everybody and jump out ahead of things. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll make note of that in our documentation. Stephanie, if you can go to the next slide, or no, you're on the right slide.
I'm going to start here. Thank you so much for that comment. And so just to preface that, we just heard updates about measures that are moving, that have a lot of exciting progress. This was a slide that we didn't quite get to at the last meeting, but kind of based on some of the conversations we've had at previous agenda setting meetings, we did want to get the CSC's feedback just on potentially prioritizing some of these topics that we do really want to move forward in the next couple of months that we just haven't heard about. we haven't, had the chance to be able to discuss in some of our previous meetings. And so we did send out a survey. We appreciate all the folks that did participate. Just from the survey, we just averaged all the scores and ranked them. And this list is a little differently arranged than the last slide because we did arrange it in order of CSC priority. And so the first, we have EV mechanic training. And something here that I did want to note is while it is listed as pending CARB approval, based on some of the work that we are doing in some of our other communities, particularly in Stockton, that has a subcommittee that is robustly working on this measure, we do potentially foresee us kind of updating that project plan to incorporate some new aspects based on what the CSC is wanting to see. And then a couple other here, drive clean. We also have our underfired charbroilers, yard trucks, public fleet vehicles, and charging plugs for trucks. And so all of these are in various stages. Some of them are pending CARB approval. Some of them we are still needing to work on that we are working on project plans for. And yard trucks is open, and we are kind of looking now at more of the outreach phase of things. And so I'm happy to take any questions, but I just want to also set us up for where we want this kind of list of certain measures to go, is we do want to be able to talk about these in upcoming meetings. And so Harder and Company will lead us in an exercise in these next few minutes here to potentially put some of these CERT measures in our upcoming meetings to discuss. With that, I'll take any questions before we kind of move it over to Harder to lead us in this exercise. Go ahead, Lilia.
Lilia?
Sí, nada más es una sugerencia. Podemos hablar un poquito más despacio. Sabemos que tenemos una buena traducción,
Yes.
pero tampoco podemos entenderlo con rápido, porque de verdad es una buena traducción la que tenemos, pero no queremos perder detalles también. Gracias por entender.
Thank you,
Thank
Lilia.
you so much for the reminder, Lilia. I think we all tried to pack a lot into the agenda today. And I will admit, Lilia, I'm like looking at the clock. Oh my goodness, here we go. So I appreciate the reminder to slow down. Ivanka?
Yeah, I know these are all part of the CERT measures, but I just want to point out that the majority of these are incentive measures that are part of Air District's regular programming, probably before AB 617 was even created. So out of that committed funding and units amount, is that money 617 funding, or is that funding the Air District already has for these incentive programs that they already had?
And maybe I heard two things in there, and I see Ryan unmuted, so I'll let him add. The first is I do also want to be super clear. If folks also, for this exercise, we also want to give opportunity for folks to also give us additional topics in addition to these. So we won't be talking about these 6 measures for the next 3 months. We definitely want to open it up, talk about all the topics. But kind of also given some of our timelines for these implementation funds, we don't want to forget about some of these things that we haven't talked about in a minute. So that's just the first point. And maybe in the funding point, I'll go ahead and pass to Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Ivanka. So no, this is dedicated AB 617 funding only. So this is, and what we've seen as we've worked with you, for example, on vegetative barriers, urban greening, we put in the SERP a certain dollar amount, but then we worked with the committee on kind of establishing what will work in the community itself. And so while we have amounts put to these, I think there's still a lot of conversations on what the actual program itself looks like. And so, but it is the dollar amount itself is dedicated. That's funding that is only for the South Central community. It can't be used in any other place. It can only be used there. And in regards to other programs, those are first come, first serve. In this one, it's dedicated that we do outreach to try to draw people into these programs, which we don't do for our other programs. We try to do broad outreach to get people to come in and take advantage and to use those programs to their. But no, this is dedicated funding for these very specific things. But all the decisions on these haven't been established yet. And so that's why we think it is important to find time and space to bring these to the committee and have a robust discussion about them.
So these programs are dedicated to AB 617, but is this dedicated 617 funding
Yes.
that are going. So this isn't, none of these programs are already being resourced by other funds that the Air District receives.
For these things, they would not be. No, this would be AB 617 funds.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Isabel.
Sí, yo tengo una pregunta. ¿El programa de entrenamiento para mecánicos ya está o está está planeándose?
This is Stephanie. That's a super great question. I'll maybe answer at high level. Just generally, the way that the program I think was written was to potentially support or develop different courses. I think as we're now learning in this day and age, particularly I'll use Stockton as an example, there is a lot of courses already available through the college that's up there, and a lot of funding that's already supporting it. And so now as we're hearing and learning about these things, we potentially want to think about creative ways in which we could potentially support the efforts that are already there, or help kind of build those programs out. So it could depend on just kind of, we want to understand what's going on in Fresno already and support those. If there are kind of classes that are set, we don't want to redo any work or anything like that. So right now, this isn't to plan out new courses.
And Stephanie, we also have Ed here, who also participates in the Stockton Steering Committee and has led or helped lead the EV mechanics. So I mean, he may want to share some of his experience there, and hopefully streamline the process maybe a little bit in Fresno. There was a lot of learning that has been taking place in Stockton.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. There has been a tremendous amount of work. One of the issues is truly it's not a lot of money that we have to put forward in the EV mechanic, and as we did additional research, there's a tremendous amount of job creation and industry effort to bring training courses to students and develop EV mechanics. One of the things that what we've looked at the most to focus on is a high school lead-in to the EV mechanic program, to make sure that we gather early on members of our community to get them started in a high school program that's I believe approximately 40 hours, although that may have changed. I missed the last meeting, but it's a great opening door to move forward and provide opportunities for the young people in our communities.
Yeah, and just to add on that, Ed, I think one of the things that we found is a lot of the programs, initially we had made connections with like community colleges, because they were just starting up some of these programs, and then COVID hit and kind of threw it in disarray a little bit. But what we found was a lot of the colleges were either already had a program that was like including like a mechanic program that was also incorporating EV into it. And my understanding is, for the majority of people, that the coursework itself would be free. So like, to Ed's point, it's like, how do you get people interested to go into that field? And then so maybe starting it earlier to then, highlight, the benefits of this opportunity, educational opportunity, career opportunity for people. And I think
the focus was, and you're right, Ryan, is that we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. There are successful programs out there, and there's a significant amount of money going towards those. And our issues, in reality, we want to open that door as early as possible and gather as much interest as we possibly can. So we're very thankful for the direction that CSC in Stockton has chosen to this point, and we are moving it forward with the thought of making it more universal for all the CSCs if they choose to include it.
Thank you, Ed, for providing that context. And I think this is exactly the discussion that we want to have as we prioritize what topics you all want to cover at the following meetings. So I'm going to pass it to Liz to guide us through this conversation so that we can bring back some of that content, Ed, to kind of answer people's questions so that we can see maybe, you know, EV mechanic training is the thing that we talk about at the next meeting. And maybe it's inviting other folks to come in. I'm not sure what the committee would like to see, but that's the precise discussion that we want to have. Go for it, Liz.
Thank you. I think this is an incredibly important subject, and it's a effort to move the ball and provide good paying jobs for the children in our communities that are growing up. I think it's an important task. So thank you.
Yeah. Hey, I don't see the raise hand feature, but I wanted to kind of share a couple initial thoughts, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
I think that looking at probably recognizing that Stockton and Fresno are like two really different communities, so the needs might look a little different relative to the communities that are impacted in the footprint. But looking at kind of like technical education through the climate justice lens with the EV training, I think if the Air District was able to leverage those resources that they're investing in specific to maybe like maybe like Edison High School students or Washington Union High School students, or and looking at maybe taking that and offering it through dual enrollment, because there have been a number of programs at those campuses that had MOUs in place with the community college district that have recently ended. And so I think that looking at, you know, how we engage like the next generation of learners by being really intentional instead of just saying, hey, community college district, here's $75,000, do an outreach campaign and talk about, you know, green jobs. I think like you could offer greater incentives by partnering with the high schools or identifying those high schools and leveraging the dual enrollment MOUs that are in place with those institutions, and really also, while also ensuring that there's diverse stakeholder representation. So looking at our undocumented students and how you engage them in this conversation around the opportunities of new workforce training jobs in the neighborhood. And I think with the new community college campus, I think that would be really advantageous if the Air District could really take the lead and guide that conversation.
Eric, much of what you've shared is exactly what the Stockton group believes, and each CSC is different. So I wouldn't pretend to put on to Fresno what Stockton is doing. I hope you understand that. But I will tell you that we recognize that Stockton's just exactly what you said. We recognize that there's the opportunity to bring people in is really an entry opportunity that we can afford to fund at this point. So, and I totally agree with your comment. Thank you.
So this question is back to Eric and Ed. I wonder then, Eric and Ed, if this is a topic that warrants more discussion that's part of a subcommittee meeting, as opposed to kicking off an agenda meeting, like let's say the next meeting. Would you all be interested in maybe potentially kicking off a subcommittee meeting to do precisely what you're talking about, Eric and Ed?
Yeah, I think just as long as it doesn't take the same amount of time like the reroute study did in its subcommittee form, because I know fall semester is like upon us, and so looking at kind of like the most effective, best use of time, and how you really move something like this forward, that's really beneficial for the community and most importantly for students, as we look to diversify the workforce.
Excuse me real quick, this is Lisa, just to piggyback on Eric. One of my nephews, he's actually a senior in high school, and they're looking at starting to register for classes in his senior year, like within the next 2 or 3 weeks. That's how fast it's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That it's the time. So, and maybe that's why it would be important to make that a priority subcommittee. What about other CSC members? Oh, Eric, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, that's fine. I can do that. I can be one of the folks that participates in the subcommittee along with others that are interested.
I'm obviously interested also.
Got it.
Yo conozco un muchacho que quiere inscribirse en las clases de mecánica, por eso estoy preguntando.
Isabel, can you repeat that question again, please?
Sí, conozco un muchacho que está en la high school que quiere hacer eso, estudiar mecánica. Por eso estaba preguntando.
Great question. So it sounds like, Isabel, it would be important for you to also be part of that subcommittee and make sure that we have a reporting structure for the updates to come to the CSC meeting. So
Sí,
you see all the, oh, go ahead.
Sí, está bien, digo.
Gracias. Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt because we're already starting to get into the conversation that this tool that you're seeing on the screen is just here to help guide. Everyone can see my screen, right? Okay. So just some context before we jump in again. The purpose of having this conversation tonight, where we are doing this intentional planning as opposed to having it in an agenda setting meeting, is to ensure that all of the CSU members and members of the public and everyone in this meeting, everyone who engages with this work, has an opportunity to really contribute to what we're going to talk about over the next couple months. We are really wanting to hear from all of you about what you think will be the most productive use of your time. And we're already hearing suggestions and thoughts from folks, which is really great. So we'll just continue the conversation. So for this activity, you will see on the left here, we have a list of priority topics. These you will recognize came from the presentation, as well as our agenda setting meetings and conversations with CSE members. Once we have a bit of a consensus around this list, we are hoping to start mapping those out across at least the next 3 meetings you'll see here. And of course, if there's anything missing from this list of priorities, please do tell us what you would like us to add. The last thing I will add is that we are really hoping to hear from every single resident and CSE member who is in tonight's meeting. So if we're noticing that anyone is a little quiet, we may actually call on you to make sure that you are having your voice heard tonight. As we go through this discussion, I'll be inviting my co-facilitators as well as the Air District to jump in and provide your thoughts as well. So we can start. Oh, yeah, Stephanie, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Liz. Before we get started, I do want to make note. I see it here on the slide, but maybe I'll just kind of emphasize or re-highlight those things for folks. One of those things being, oh, thanks, Amy. I see your hand, your cursors on it. One of those things is in some of the previous agenda settings and just our kind of standing commitment to you all. We do want to make sure we're doing quarterly air monitoring updates and working with the folks that are interested in providing feedback on the presentation. And so something we talked about in some previous agenda settings, and I think even a CSC meeting, is having an air monitoring presentation soon. And we did have Kimberly volunteer and was available, and our district team will also be available for the April meeting. So that's why that's there. We're happy to hear any objections about it, but if not, we can plan to work with Kimberly McCoy to have that presentation. And maybe the second thing I'll make note of is I do see it in that yellow sticky at the top, but we really would love to have an in-person meeting with folks. And we would want of course, if we're going to meet in person, we want to make sure it's not just us giving presentations to you all. We want to make sure it's a really engaging meeting. And that's something that we are potentially looking forward to, maybe closer towards the summer. And something that we did potentially want to do is to pair it, almost make it like an open house. And as we're recruiting new resident members, to be able to bring them to an in-person meeting, that way they can meet folks and get really acquainted with the process. So those are the two notes I'll add as folks are jumping into this exercise.
Any questions about what Stephanie and Air District shared before you CSC members jump in to provide your recommendations?
Hi, it's Lisa. I just have a real quick question of the legal standing of this meeting, because I know that the city has basically asked all their advisory boards to start holding meetings back at City Hall, and basically under the Brown Act, and I forget what other one. I forget what other, it's like an AB something or another that basically says that some other stuff that is mandated for actually these sort of public meetings. And I'm just wondering what guidelines you guys fall under with the lifting of the COVID moratorium and all.
I guess I'll answer that one. So Lisa, as a community steering committee, this type of committee is not subject to either the Brown Act or the Bagley-Keene, which the requirements to meet in public are applicable to. So I mean, we're okay to continue. At the same time, I think we are looking for opportunities, and Stephanie's going to talk about this a little bit later about finding opportunities to get back together as a group and have in-person meetings as well. In addition to continuing to have Zoom meetings, so looking at more of a hybrid model.
Bill, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yes, in regard to the air monitoring, my question or request wouldn't necessarily have to do directly with that, but I would be interested at some point if the district, could give sort of a historical progress of how bad things were, so many years ago, and how things have progressed, how bad they've gotten, and if we're making any improvements, to the situation in the AB 617 area, like, are we making progress compared to, we've all heard, how bad the air quality is in this area and so forth. And, maybe some kind of generalized progress of how every place else is so much better or worse, or, just kind of a generalized historical progression of where we've been and where we're going, and if are we making progress or are we not? And does the district have some idea of what caused the air quality to be so bad in this area? so that, it's more of more specifics on what we might be able to do to correct the situation, and just, maybe a generalized progress report of, is it forest fires? Is it a certain type of manufacturing, or is it all trucks and cars and so forth? It would be interesting. It doesn't necessarily have to be at this next meeting or anything, but at some point in time, if that would be possible, it would be interesting to me. I don't know if it would be interesting to anybody else or not, but that was just a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. The historical context is definitely important. I see, Ivanka, you have your hand up. I'm not sure if that was in response to Bill's comment.
Yeah, I agree with Bill. If we're going to have the conversation of where we've been, where we are in the conversation of air monitor updates, what is that data showing us? We need to have that continually conversation, but more importantly, what are we going to do about it when we see those spikes? So a part of our CERT measures is also enforcement, right? And the regulation of why we're doing this work to see changes happen. And so I would like to see that if we're going to discuss, air monitoring, the data that comes from that, I get that you guys work hard, but we on the EJ side hear too much a lot of times of your own self-proclaimed patting yourself on the back about the work that's being done and how much and how far we've come. But that's an old record if we're not doing something new to try to reduce the continual implications that we're facing. So my point is, what are the actions that we are now going to do now that we've had some time to collect data? And then a second point is, under these priority topics of area sources discussion, stationary source discussions, all that is tied directly to land use. All of this is tied to poor land use decisions made by this city. So if these are priority measures to discuss about those area sources or stationary sources, we have to not just look at these measures and forget about the ones that we've already worked on, because a lot of those ones that are really important to direct impacts on community that we've supposedly already worked on have just faded away, but are still at the core of the impacts that we're facing. We still don't have an agreement with the city. That weaseled out, right? We still aren't willing to look at the indirect source rule because the district wants to wait on seeing what South Coast is doing. So those are discussions that are not ended, and they need to stay as a focal point to move some of these priorities that we're looking at on our screen right now, to move those forward. You can't separate some of these other ones that we've been working on from the ones that are still to come. And so I would like to see on here that if we're going to discuss stationary sources and area sources, that should be in a conversation together regarding land use. I like the idea that we've had subcommittees, and those of us that have the time and capacity to go off and dig deeper can do that. But too much of that is almost a way of getting the concentration of what needs to be looked at in this primary CSC meeting. We'll discuss that later. And it's a push off. It's pushing off something that needs to remain front and center. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Ivanka. We hear you, and these are definitely all interconnected, and it can make it hard to try to parse it apart across these months. I'm hearing that if we were to have an air monitoring update, we're wanting to include maybe some of that historical context along with concrete next steps. And then I also heard for like the stationary sources and area sources, we would have to incorporate conversations about land use. Steph, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think, and this is Stephanie, Justin, I think us wanting to make sure these meetings don't remain super, super packed. I do know that typically when we talk about air monitoring, that meeting tends to be the whole meeting. I totally agree with what Ivanka's saying, that all of this is interconnected, but I do want to be mindful that typically when we do an air monitoring update, I know even our standing updates get pushed to an email. So I do want to be mindful of that. And I think another consideration also is, I know just generally as an update to the CSC, I know it's an action item just generally to get together the land use subcommittee, and our team is continuing to work with the city of Fresno to try and schedule this. And I think just generally we want to make sure that the city is coming to the table and is available for these meetings. So that's something that we'll continue to work on. I hear the desire to kind of meet with the city of Fresno and talk more about land use issues, and we want to make sure the city is present for those conversations. So I think we'll work with our land use team to follow up with the city on being able to come to an upcoming meeting for sure.
So to be really exact, I want to follow up on that, Ivanka and Stephanie. So the goal here is, we know that not everyone can attend the agenda setting meetings for Fresno. So often some folks will feel a little bit disappointed in that they're not seeing their agenda item on the agenda. So I want to hear from the CSC folks of like, what would you like to propose to be on this April versus May versus June agenda? And so Ivanka, thinking about what you shared, would it make sense for us to add, like, just to put the stationary sources for the April meeting, knowing that it needs to be contextualized based on what you shared? Or are you thinking now that what Stephanie shared, it should be like a May thing? And sorry to throw one more thing in your thought process, but do you think that these would be conversations that are better had in person or continue to have those on Zoom? Is something else that we're hoping that CSC members can consider. So I guess
I'm not really particular on which meeting space, if it's May, if April's air monitoring, if that's going to take up enough time. And the other thing is too, it's like updates need time for discussion, not just receiving information. So that's fine if those are put into the May conversation, because when we get updates from the city or whomever is, is giving the update, we need to be able to have time to have the discussion around that, because there may be decisions that the CSC wants to propose out of that update.
That makes sense, Ivanka. So maybe then the April meeting is the air monitoring updates with some more comprehensive updates and time for discussion.
Yes.
And we're making notes of the comments that you all shared and putting them in those stickies below, so that when we have the presenters prepare for these updates, we can tell them that we're asking to give the update based on the historical context, based on enforcement, and anything else that continues to be shared in this space right now. Lisa, I see your hand up. I want to get to the CSC committee members first, so I'll call on you in a second. So for other CSC members, what else is standing out as a topic that should be included in within the next quarter?
Go ahead, Dr. Curry.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments from Ivanka regarding sort of that historical perspective and how it is so connected to land use. And so given that we started this meeting talking about a quote from Chanel Fletcher from Environmental Justice, how are we incorporating the fact that there is an environmental justice arm of CARB that seemingly could be weighing in a different way around meeting with the city and having the discussions on land use, because it really is environmental injustice. And so how do we utilize that resource in a much more effective way so that we're not waiting for the city to come to the table? what can we be proposing that is proactive and doesn't have us waiting for another situation where there's conflict about a zoning discussion and the same communities are then further impacted. So how do we utilize the tools of the environmental justice arm in a much more effective way, given that people already know the situation in Fresno and South Central Fresno, and really have clarity around the challenges around air quality?
It's a great question. I know we have folks on the CARB team here tonight. I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts about that. Maybe if the Air District also has anything they'd like to add.
Oh, this is Brian from CARB, and we have Dr. Curry. We are in really close contact with our environmental justice unit. So land use is historically something that CARB, we don't have expertise in, but we are trying our best to get more involved. Yeah, and Deli's here as well, so she can add.
No, thank you, Brian. You're right on. And Dr. Curry, I report directly to Chanel Fletcher. I'm the director of the Office of Community Air Protection. Chanel is responsible for environmental justice, working with tribes, border affairs, and as I said, I'm under her, so she's also responsible for AB 617 as the deputy executive officer, right? So we do work closely together with the environmental justice unit. And at least when it comes to the CEQA portion of land use decisions where there may be a project or a comment letter that we might comment on, if the situation warrants it, we actually coordinate through Brian and his team with other CARB divisions that focus on projects that have to do with transportation, sometimes housing, and we work together to try to be responsive, to those issues. We aren't always able to write or weigh in the CEQA process on a land use project. There really has to be a lot of basis for our comments, and sometimes we aren't able to find that, right? So just know that. On the larger issue, what you've really put your finger on, and others have as well, is that on the one hand, groups like our committee here are working to improve air quality with resources and expertise from the Air District and your all's wisdom in terms of what's happening at the community level. And at the same time, we see land use decisions being made that neither CARB nor the Air Districts can directly affect or influence. So that is one of the huge challenges associated with this program. It's really going to take all of us thinking through like how to make it work, how to work around, how to bring people to the table and keep them at the table, how to incentivize them to consider the priorities established by this committee as land use decisions are being made. And I'm happy to bring this back to Chanel and report back to her and share anything that she might like to share. And also happy if you would like to have a conversation with Chanel, I'm happy to help arrange that.
Yeah, I would really appreciate that. And just for clarity's sake, that isn't to suggest that CARB or environmental justice folks like yourself have not been participating when asked to weigh in or to provide some grounding information, and that's been helpful. But I still really want to figure out how to be more proactive and to really stop the impacts before they are occurring and interrupting this pattern that that is so comfortably in place. What can we creatively, innovatively do that leads to a different outcome? So the discussions have been helpful. There has been certainly action on your part in weighing in for the community, but we still see, as you said, it isn't sufficient, and there just feels like there needs to be some additional ways that we are figuring out the proactive side of all of this. So I would love to have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And if it's okay, Deldy, I think we'll add that to the action items, so we can expect to hear an update. I will also read out some comments in the chat. There have been agreements with Bill's comments. And Eric also just wrote in the chat, CARB has historically ignored the needs of historically Black, environmentally burned communities. CARB is just a listening ear at this point. And thank you for saying that. It is difficult feedback to give and hear, but it's important that we do acknowledge the historical and systemic racism that we encounter. Ivanka, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I would think that if we, if that's a time, I agree with Dr. Curry, if it's not a time to have those conversations now, but how we're looking at this proactively, because I know that in the community that I live in, Southwest Fresno, and the residents that I work with on 617, we're tired of the pointing of the finger and the easy way out to say that that's not our jurisdiction or that's not our authority. So I question this: if you don't have the authority, that's not to say that you can't be in support of what community is facing. The Air District in its mission statement says that it is a public health agency. However, most of your regulation is regulating the same industries that are allowed to permit and dump in the communities of color that are being impacted by these negative health impacts. So at what point will these agencies who want to tell me or tell the community that I live in, well, we hear you. I'm sure y'all know I'm very vocal, so we know you hear me. That's you don't have a problem hearing me. That's not the problem at all. What actions can be taken instead of just saying we are not able to because we don't have the responsibility or jurisdiction. I believe you have the responsibility to find those manners in which Dr. Curry is talking about. And if we already have our Attorney General, the top cop of our state, that unfortunately looks at this city as that child that just can't get it right, why aren't these agencies as the Air District and the CARB having those discussions with the Attorney General, saying, we agree with that letter that you wrote about the general plans of this county, those land use decisions that are being made in Southwest Fresno. If the Attorney General is making comments on this city and on this county, that gives you the opportunity to have that conversation with that department. If anything, to protect yourself from being legally sued in other manners by a community who feels like you're failing them. So when we're talking about what can actually be done proactively, that's a big one right there. You could have those conversations and report back, yeah, we're having those conversations. We're trying to find other ways that may not be inside the box of our jurisdiction. There's always a way if you're willing, and really for the Air District, because we know that your board that you have to report to does not give a damn about this community. We know that. We know that you as a staff have a hard hill to climb a lot of times because of the board members that are that run our Air District. So we know those hard conversations are there. And definitely, I think, Deldy, there needs to be more that is done. And, since you and Chanel have taken those offices that you are currently in, it is still the same story that we've been hearing since Karen Magliano was in those positions. So we do want to see change. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for voicing your concerns. I want to make sure that we also bring forward any other comments and topics that you want to make sure get discussed in the next 3 months during these meetings. Are there any items that are listed here from what you all have shared in the past, or any new topics that we need to make note of as we prepare for the next 3 months of engagement?
Excuse me, did you forget about me by chance?
No,
Oh.
no, I have not, Lisa, of course not. Just wanting to make sure the CSC members comment on the topics, and then we'll open it up to public comment.
All righty.
let's see here. Give me a second. I'm not seeing any hands raised from CSC members.
Can I impregnate your conversation?
Go for it.
I want to piggyback on what everybody has said. You know what's really interesting about land use is that the city really does not engage the committee, never has, probably never will. One of the things I'm actively reading, and I'm a very slow reader because, you know, the double cataracts and all, is the city just put out on March 6th the draft annual action plan. And it's a lovely read. I mean, I'm learning a lot. And on page 29, it's very interesting. They have a list of vacant city-owned parcels of interest for housing. And within this list, they have some spaces that are light industry and within the footprint of the 617. And my question would be to Air District staff, what are your comments on this annual action plan, their housing action plan? And at what point is the city going to come to the 617 and even make a 5-10 minute presentation that this document is available to them in hard copy for comments, and also talk people through this? Because, you know, they're looking at putting a lot of housing in the area, but there's also a lot of light industry, and there's several vacant lots within 617. I count at least 4, but I haven't gone through the entire list with a fine-tooth comb. And how is that going to impact the 617 footprint? Is if the city has this vacant land, they decide to sell it off and not use it for housing, how's that going to impact? How's it going to impact the truck reroute? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And so far, I haven't read any definitive answers. So there you go. Thank you. Oh, and all comments are due by April 6th, guys.
Thank you. We do have Ryan, I see you unmuted. We do have a plan to have a update later in the standing updates, but go ahead, Ryan.
I was just asking Lisa, what was that document again?
Oh, you don't have it. It's the draft annual action plan. And it is for, it's the one on housing.
Okay, all right.
Brian Brad, I used to work with the guy, Sisk, S-I-S-K is his last name. He's over in planning. He's the head of this. He just actually got a bunch of these printed up. So it's an interesting 145-page read. Surprised you don't have it already. Should have been sent to you through the clearinghouse.
Lisa, we do have time allocated for the next agenda item when we get to the standing updates to talk about the reroute study. So hopefully we can have some of those items. And I see Greg has raised his hand, but before we get to answering, Greg, just want to make sure that we don't have any other input on the agenda items for the next 3 months. And if you do continue to have comments, feel free to join the agenda setting meetings. We do know that it's an extra burden to ask folks to come to the agenda setting meetings. This is why we wanted to allocate some time during today's meeting to make space for you all to tell us the recommendations for these meetings. And the other topic that we didn't get to talking about was when you would potentially want to have the next in-person meeting. And as Stephanie mentioned at the top of this agenda item, potentially having like somewhat of an open house so that we can have all these agencies available to answer all these questions in a much more interactive one-on-one with agency folks. I'm not sure if folks have comments on that yet, but if not, we can transition to updates. Okay, we're going to take the notes that folks shared about these topics, and we see that we have for sure, our April meeting agenda set was packed with many recommendations, and it looks like May as well. If you all consider more topics as you're thinking about what you want to see covered in these meetings, please plan to attend the agenda setting meeting. And if you have comments about in-person meetings or venues or things like that, please do also reach out to the Air District or to any of us. Now we're going to go ahead and transition to some general agency updates. And we're going to go ahead and start with Greg.
Well, actually, I was going to talk about the agenda too. So,
go do it all.
No, yeah. So I'll wrap it all in one comment. So going back to the EV mechanics. So Fresno City, Fax, and Proterra, which is a major bus manufacturer, all have a program starting up the West Fresno campus. So I think that when you do have that conversation, the allied dean, Kathy Barabee something, Dr. Barabee needs to be involved in that conversation to help inform the process. Second, at Duncan Polytech, they have currently a heavy duty mechanic program. They introduced the EV component this semester. And because of the COVID environment, they haven't fully opened it up. But I also think Fresno Unified and their career tech folks need to be involved in the conversation, because both of those programs have lots of money and includes all of the tools and resources available. The West Fresno campus program, we're actually building an entire advanced propulsion lab there with funding that we've all received and then we've given to the district. So I think those are great things to do, but that's been delayed by a year because of the construction at the West Fresno campus. So putting that aside, there's a lot of things going on, and I just think you ought to add those folks. On the last conversation we just had about land use, I will say that every meeting there is a city rep on. Oftentimes Jennifer Clark can't participate because we run into planning commission meetings like tonight. And actually Scott is in a storm prep meeting for another matter and at some district committee meeting tonight. So you have me, unfortunately. But I will say, if there's a time where we are not responding to attending a meeting, then you may need to ask for an alternate to be selected, because between Scott, Jennifer, and I, we are all involved. And I can't remember a time where one of us has not been able to either get there or send the requisite staff to any meetings. And so I will leave it all at, and then the last thing I was going to say is go back to Lisa's document. Ryan, you probably don't see it because it's not a planning document. It is, that's actually a funding document of how the annual action plan is how you spend federal funds. CDBG, home and ESG and HOPWA funds. And so this is the comment period for how we spend those funds. It's roughly about 15 to 17 million each year in those 4 categories. And so that's what that document is. It's not a quote unquote planning document. And I think I covered everything.
Thank you, Greg. And then one follow-up, did you have any other updates related to their truck reroute study that you wanted to provide?
Oh, yes. Scott did send me something. Scott says that IBI continues to work on the existing conditions report. KBA has sent out a survey via email to provide input on the existing conditions, and the city is currently working to get the surveys posted on our website, shared on social media, and staff is attending community meetings to inform the community of the study and encourage them to complete the survey. The city hopes to gather the survey information by the end of April. And then on the planning side, Jennifer Clark wanted me to let everyone know that the notification for planning for any planning entitlements will begin to go out the week of April 2nd. And that's a way to alert people who have either already signed up or do sign up. And I think most of this committee has done one or the other. of any entitlements that are popping up in your neighborhood or without, throughout the entire city. And so that's it.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. We're going to transition to updates from CAR. Actually, I have a hand raised from Ivanka. Go ahead, Ivanka.
Yes, it's me again. See, you didn't need a co-host. You know, I'm always going to say something.
Thank you.
On the truck reroute study, I had the concern that through a lot of these emails that have been back and forth was there is the community advisory committee, and the email that I had received, I was trying to follow up, just get details of how is outreach going? How many people have you reached? What methods are you using? It was that type of email, only to find out that any of us that were on the steering committee that may have applied to be on that advisory committee will not be allowed to be on the advisory committee because we are on the 617 steering committee. And so I have a problem with that because the advisory committee needs to be informed by residents that have been, either part of Southwest Fresno residents from the time of the specific plan or residents that are involved in 617 here on this committee are being separated from any new community members that may enter into that space. And a lot of the expertise or just the process, there's residents on this committee or members that have already been involved. So I find that very concerning that somehow this process of that advisory committee was separating folks who thought from this space we would be able to carry on if we so had the capacity in the space of the truck reroute study process. I don't know if other residents on here are aware of that, or other partners that are on this call, that if you had applied and wanted to be a part of that. I heard somebody, I hopefully can correct me and tell me it's not right, but from the email that I got, we would not be allowed to be on that community advisory committee. And that just shouldn't be that way. The only thought that I was trying to put together is, are they doing that to try to control contentious environment of community meetings? But if that's the case, you're still not bringing all stakeholders together. I don't know if we need to take a vote on that, but I think it needs to be heard from this steering committee that if there's anybody on this steering committee that wants to be a part of that process, they should so be allowed as part of the application of any other stakeholder that was invited into that space.
Hey, Ivanka, so what I read here in the paragraph, the 2 paragraphs above, is that the CSC Truck Study Subcommittee would be invited and encouraged to attend alongside of the Community Advisory Group. So there's 2 bodies, but they're meeting all together.
Okay, but I think I have the concern of whether or not one party is getting a consensus vote and the other party is not. So I would not be showing up in a community advisory group to be in that space as the way public members are in this space on this call, having to listen in, but may not have the same amount of say as those of us that are part of the CSC. That's a no-go. Like if we're—
No, I hear you there. I'm with you on that one, Ivanka.
So
Yeah.
I need clarification for that because
Okay.
very concerning.
No, if you would do me a favor and just forward me the correspondence you had, and I will clear that up for you tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Thank you, Ivanka. Do you want us to write that as an action item or you got it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we will do that. Lilia?
Sí, es relacionado con el Staples. La semana pasada nosotros, por parte de Familias en Acción, tuvimos en colaboración con California Environment for Justicia Ambiental junto con Ayamin. Yo tuve una reunión comunitaria y créanme que es tan bonito mirar que la participación de los papás, la reunión de nosotros duró 3 horas y duraron casi 6 horas con nosotros para llenar esas encuestas que estaba haciendo Ayamin relacionado con el aire y contaminantes. Son Se llevó bastante, tanto que se terminó sus tarjetas que traía de $30 y la gente todavía se quedó esperando y se registraron conmigo, terminaron sus encuestas y se quedaron registradas todavía conmigo para que le regresaran sus stipends. Es triste, la verdad, mirar que la gente participa solamente cuando hay intermedio un intensivo. Entonces, pero si hay una manera de poder saber de la comunidad, yo pienso que esa es una buena táctica que estamos utilizando, que están utilizando para esto.
Gracias, Lilia. Any other questions before we move on to CARB's update? All right. Thank you, Brian, for being here tonight. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Oh, thanks. Actually, Jennifer was going to give the updates tonight. Sorry, I didn't let you all know.
It's all good. Thank you. Jennifer, I'm not seeing you on my screen. Where are you?
I'm here.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. So we just have quick 2 updates. The March 8th consultation group meeting recording is now posted on our website. And then also there's a CARB board meeting on March 23rd and the agenda is to be determined. And I'll go ahead and drop those links in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for being here tonight as well to provide that update. And tonight, I'm not seeing anyone from the Department of Pesticide Regulations. Just double checking they didn't show up while we were talking, but not seeing anyone. I did see David from Caltrans. Are you still here, David?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm just listening to this meeting. I have no updates.
Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to open it up to any other agencies, whether you're state or local, who have some updates that you think that folks within the AB 617 boundary should be aware of. And Stephanie, I see your hand up, but before we go to the Air District, wanted to make sure that others don't have any updates.
Hi, this is Sandra.
Hi, Sandra.
So I don't have necessarily an update, just a request. Fresno BHC and Leadership Council has been working with residents in South Central Fresno, specifically around the Caltrans approval of the Freeway 99 interchange expansion project, which is in the AB 617 community. And so I would really encourage members from this body to reach out to Caltrans and other state officials directly about how that action is actually not conducive to the goals of AB 617, and also the fact that it's in direct contradiction to their equity statement, which they posted and issued in 2020. So I just really would encourage folks to, as members of this committee and as interested members of the project area, to really elevate how that's contrary to the stated outcomes that the state has proclaimed that they want to implement, and the fact that residents have been very vocal about their opposition to that expansion.
Thank you, Sandra. Any other comments or updates from agencies? No, the Air District does have an update. So Steph and Jamie, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to thank all of you that helped us out with our show and tell fireplace change out event here a few weeks ago. A special shout out to Central California Environmental Justice Network. They were able to have some of their staff at the event, and we're working on getting information for a survey they're doing. We had a few dozen people come in, and we've had a couple people take advantage of the program already. We did ask folks where they heard about the program, and most of them had heard about it through social media. So that was some good information to get. We're looking to continue these types of outreach events in the community to make sure that folks are aware of the opportunities that are out there, and always open to additional suggestions on how we can make these events better. Again, huge shout out and thank you to those individuals that helped spread the word on this great event. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Hey, Eric Payne, am executive director of the Central Valley Urban Institute. We, if you recall at the last meeting, I shared that we had an opportunity to take a busload of folks up to Sacramento to the CART meeting and the subcommittee meeting. We did just that. We had a full load of folks that spoke out about a number of concerns relative to communities that are environmentally burdened. And just the lack of response that we've seen from CARB and other stakeholders. And so we will be going back with a larger group. So those that are interested, please reach out.
Thank you for the update, Eric. Send us pictures so we can add them to our slide deck. Also, I want to make sure that I read Brian Moore from CARB also has an update. There's the draft of the AB 617 annual update available for the public. So you can download that in English and Spanish. And if you click on the chat, you should be able to go directly to the website where you can download it. Stephanie, did you have another update to add?
No, I just unmuted to also thank everyone for not just spreading the word about the show and tell event, but also providing the feedback that we had. I think a lot of folks were there. We did an exercise like a Jamboard to provide feedback for how we could do outreach. And we did, I think we were able to do pretty much all of the things that were suggested. So I just wanted to thank folks and for all of those suggestions. That's all. Thanks, Amy.
Ivanka?
Yeah, first, number one, do we have a scheduled date for the next land use subcommittee? Are we moving on to other subcommittee updates right now, or?
Yep, now's your chance.
Is there a scheduled date for the next land use subcommittee meeting?
So Stephanie talked about it a little bit earlier, Ivanka. We reached out to the city of Fresno. We reached out again today to get dates from them on looking to set one up. Typically what we do is we get some dates where it works for people, and then we doodle poll the subcommittee. What works best for them.
Okay. All right. In that space of land use subcommittee, or I should say in the space of updates, even though this falls under land use, moving forward, steering committee, I would like this space to also include the land use projects that are impacting 617. If any of us know about those, it needs to be brought to our attention and have a right to come together and make a vote on what our opinion as a CSC is about that project that is going to be moving through the city's planning process. And so with that, I will start with one that I had spoken to Jessica Olson yesterday. It has not yet made it to Planning Commission, but I will send over to the Air District for a heads up in hopes that you will do your CEQA commenting on this. And this is if the city is not going to come forward with a good process that allows us an agreement between what we had asked for through some awareness of an MOU, I'm now having to try to find a space in here to do this, which should be on the city's responsibility with the Air District of finding that process for us to know about these projects that keep popping up in the South Central area that the city only wants to be industrialized and ignore the community that is there. So tonight's project I want to bring to your attention is most of you know where Cherry Avenue is, and that we have the Orange Center Elementary School that lies between North Avenue. You go south on Cherry and it's before you reach Central Avenue. On that strip, it is that road is the road between sphere of influence of the city, but yet not yet completely city property. It's still part of county parcels. So last night at the District 3 Implementation Committee meeting, that is where projects have to first come forward to the committee that's made up of residents of the district. Lisa is on the district committee for her area. And this project is developed by Crown Enterprises for the business known as Central Transport. Central Transport is having to find and relocate into another industrial area because they're being pushed out by the high-speed rail east of the 99 somewhere near Cedar. And they have grown out of capacity of that current facility that they're using. The type of business that they are, as in the name, Central Transport, is a transfer station for what? Heavy-duty trucks. How far are they from the Orange Center Elementary? Not even 1,000 feet north of Orange Center Elementary School. So I am really expecting that the Air District will write comments on this project. These are mobile sources, so I would hope that CARB would be able to write CEQA documents. And they are moving from a current facility that only has 40 docking stations to a facility that will have 100 docking stations. It is 24/7 ran. The amount of light pollution, it's just bright all the time over there. And there's no guarantee that they will not be using the south part of Cherry Avenue passing that school. Now, by right, if Leadership Council with community members who are pushing for this with our help are trying to get any facilities then are in that area to only using North Avenue to exit from the left from 41 to 99 along east and west of North Avenue. However, we know that the trucks coming from the south end of the state are cutting into the community and traveling northbound on some of these primary farm roads where the homes are. And so this is a project that I believe that the steering committee should actually take a vote and say, we do not support this type of facility coming into the community that's that close to the school. And I hope that the Air District and CARB can look at this, especially looking at thresholds that our city and the businesses that fall into this area are really trying to rely on thresholds that were made by general plans in the past that do not account for the future growth of this area. So there's no true checks and balances when the judge and the jury are the same, in that it's the city that's writing a very faulty, inadequate general plan that says, oh, as long as you don't reach these thresholds, you're okay to move forward with that project. But the thresholds that were set, it's very questionable when you hold it up against CEQA. So specific to this project, it's very concerning that it is being allowed to move forward, that it's being allowed to be zoned into the city when the city currently has not finished its South Central specific plan. And it's almost as if the strategy of the city is, let's push as many industrial facility projects into this area before we finish some crucial projects, like crucial program policies, like the South Central specific plan that has a community-driven component to actually make sure that rezoning of heavy industry zoning land uses is not right in the front yard of houses, and that zoning is somehow downgraded so that there is a barrier between the house and the facility with a lesser impactful use. Of course, business does not want to see that. And so their version of a zoning plan for that specific plan is just heavy industry throughout, all the way up to the borders of the school. And so we have that specific plan, as well as our truck study that we are working on with the city, and our study to prove why you can't continue to allow heavy duty trucks with the health analysis pass by these schools. But as long as those are not finished, you have a city that is continually allowing project by project to pop up without any standardized protections for this community. And I don't know if all you are aware of this. Is the visual that I'm trying to make sure you all understand, that it's bigger than the individual CERT measures that we're working on. But The next step for this Crown Enterprises Central Transport business is that it will have to come back to the District 3 Implementation Committee on March 28th because they didn't have quorum last night, but they did still give their presentation. So if folks want to show up and as representatives of the 617 area, make comments as to why we should oppose that. Also moving forward in this space, under that update of land use, if there's not an update from land use subcommittee, we should still use this space for updating on individual projects that any of us know about, whether like tonight Sandra updated us about what's happening with the Caltrans overpass on the North Avenue and 99. We have this one, the Central Transport, and the other one that's going on right now is also Coca-Cola facility is also coming in with more trucks on the corner of North Avenue and East. We have 3 minutes, so I will stop there, but I will be sending out to residents on this steering committee information, and as well as to Jessica, the information that I got from the D3, the submittals of their materials for that, in hopes that the Air District would also make comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivanka, for bringing that to everyone's attention. So we look forward to receiving that email from you to send to Jessica so that the rest of the committee can get access to it. And then we've also noted the process that you're recommending for the land use planning subcommittee. All right, not seeing any other hands raised at this moment. So Liz is gonna wrap us up to next steps.
Yeah, if there are no other, if there are no other comments, then we can start wrapping up, and I will share my screen so that we can review the action items from tonight. Okay. Can you all see the action items? So the first one, and again, I'll pause after I read each of these out loud in case anyone has any questions, clarifications, or modifications. So the first action item is CSC members are invited to reach out to the Air District to sign up for the new AB 617 text alerts. Next, the Air District will provide follow-up to the CSC on the implementation of the CERT measures that were discussed tonight. Some of those follow-ups include the number of buses, how schools will be selected as a part of that CERT measure, how many air filtration units will be selected, and also determining if portable units qualify as part of this work. The next action item is Deldy from CARB will follow up with Chanel, who is a part of the CARB Environmental Justice team, to discuss feedback that was provided in tonight's CSC meeting, and will provide updates at the next CSC meeting on potential future engagements. The next action item is the City of Fresno CSC representatives will follow up with the CSC regarding their participation in the advisory committee. If there's any specification that we can add to this, it is a little vague, but do feel free to let us know if you have any edits to clarify. Next, the CSC is invited to share their feedback on CARB's AB 617 annual update. The link was provided in the chat and is also noted here. Next, the Air District will connect with the City of Fresno and the CSC to schedule the next land use subcommittee. A doodle poll has already been sent out, and for those who are interested in joining, please do respond with your availability.
Liz, this is Stephanie.
Yeah.
I do want to clarify that. I think Brian was just saying that typically our process is once we get those dates from the city of Fresno, we do send a doodle. And so we haven't got those dates yet. And when we do, we will doodle that.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks, Liz.
Looks like someone's already in there editing that. So the last action item, the Land Use Planning Subcommittee will develop a process to review land use projects and proposals and ensure that the Air District and CARB are reviewing and completing the CEQA process. And that was the last action item. So that was a lot, and a lot was discussed tonight. So want to take a moment to see if there's anything we missed or if there are any changes to what was read out loud. I am not seeing any. Oh, Natalie, go ahead.
Yeah, just one thing, just to reiterate, like Ivanka's point, just like until the next land use subcommittee is scheduled, having space for those land use updates in the general CSC meeting.
Yes, thank you so much for that. So we can clarify that action item, and then moving forward in our CSC meetings, part of those regular standing updates, we will invite CSC members to share any updates about those land use projects that are coming up.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else? And I see Brian clarified in the chat that the comment period for the annual report closes on March 25th. And if there are no other comments or questions, then we can start wrapping up. On behalf of the Harder & Company facilitation team, I would like to thank everybody again for your continued commitment to AB 617 and showing up to these meetings. I would like to pass it to Ryan before we open it up for public comment.
Thanks, Liz. Just want to thank everybody for the participation, the dialogue, and the sharing. And hope everybody has a good night. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. We can open it up for a public comment. Yeah, if anyone in this meeting has anything they would like to share, now is your time. But if not, we hope everyone has a really safe evening. Yeah, thank you all again, and hope you have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Please make note of the corrected date for the next meeting on Zoom.
Thank you.
Yes.